Hey everyone, welcome to the channel Tech with KG. Today we're going to be taking a look at Elden Ring, and what we're going to do in this video is try to walk you through how to get the best HDR possible for your TV, and also take a look at what the difference is with VRR on and off, and I'm going to tell you how it felt because I did play it on the Sony A80J and then I played it on the LG C1. So these are going to be the two comparisons that I make in this video. All the footage that you see will be from the Sony A80J and the LG C1. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into HDR settings and how HDR works in this game. As far as I can see from the HDR settings, no matter what you do with your system's HDR calibration, it's not going to affect you in game for Elden Ring. So that's something you want to take note of when you are trying to set up HDR in this game. It's all going to be done through the game's menu. What makes this game unique is that for the HDR settings, you could actually walk around and set your HDR while you're playing the game if you really wanted to. So you can check different areas and see which areas are going to bring out the best HDR highlights for you, which makes setting HDR up in this game very easy, and just you can tweak it to your liking. And that's what I recommend. I don't recommend that you straight up copy my settings, just use them as a guideline and just try to find your best settings, because at the end of the day, this is just going to be kind of a starting point of where to go with HDR. You really just want the specular highlights to look the best that they can, so that's going to be your main objective when you're setting up HDR. So taking a look at what the difference is with HDR in this game, you have pretty much three sliders. The most important slider is going to be the middle slider. You're just going to set this to the max brightness of your TV. It's just when you go below it, you're getting weaker highlights. Use this as a standard number. Try 1500 nits for a bright LCD. If it's just a regular mid-range LCD, just do 1000 nits, and if it's in OLED, do 700 or 800 nits. That's typically the range you want to look at. Now the next setting is the brightness setting. This is just the overall brightness of the game. This is the game's brightness. It's not really tied to your HDR highlights, though it can give you the perception of it being brighter. So if this is something that you like, you can crank this up, but just keep in mind that you might be breaking the immersion a little bit when you crank it up. Though when you are in dark areas, it doesn't matter how bright you have it set, it's still going to be super dark. So just keep in mind that you're just really affecting the overall brightness, and the HUD brightness is tied to this as well. By default, this is set to 5. This is probably okay for most people. Me personally, I just like the darker atmosphere for this type of game. I set this to 0 if I turn tone mapping on from the LG TV. And for the Sony TV, I put it at 3, though you could probably keep it at 5 and be okay. Saturation is entirely your personal preference. Alright, so I'm going to go to some TV specific settings here for the Sony TV. And one thing that I was looking at is if I wanted to turn on live color for this. And I lean towards not turning on live color for this game. Just would create too much of an oversaturated look, honestly. And this just not the type of look I want for this game. So it's entirely personal preference. The next thing, reality creation. To me, here's a good side-by-side example. Even if you're going to be using performance mode, you're still going to have some textures that are a bit blurry. And I do recommend using performance mode, especially when you're playing on the Sony TV, and I'll have more on that a little bit later. If you are using performance mode, it's going to feel a little blurry on the textures at times. Reality creation really does clean this up, and it makes a real difference. So if you look at this example, here is reality creation off, and then here is reality creation on. And if you look at the spider web here, you can see that it is brought out a little bit. Also, if you look at the stone textures, you can see those are brought out a little bit as well. Gradation preferred is what I use for my tone mapping method on the Sony TV, and I highly recommend you guys do the same. It's going to give you the best HDR possible, in my opinion, for this game. Alright, so for LG, let's move on to those settings. For the HDR mode, this is also going to be entirely personal preference again. But HDR tone mapping on is going to give you the most pop out of your picture. And I think most people are going to be okay playing like this. The second way to do it is either HDR tone mapping off or HDRG. You would think it would be the same because the system settings seem to have no effect on the HDR whatsoever. but there is a difference between off and HGIG in this game. As far as any extra settings go, I like using Game Optimizer on RPG mode. For whatever reason, it gives a little bit more of a color pop to the picture. So if you have an LG C1 or a G1, try it on RPG mode, see what I mean, from having it on standard to RPG. If you want a little bit more of a brightness boost, you could just use FPS mode, and what that does is it just jumps the black stabilizer up to 13. You could do this by default as well on standard by just messing with the black stabilizer, but yeah, play around with Game Optimizer and see if you find something that fits your liking. I always encourage people to mess around with the Game Optimizer settings with the black stabilizer. It's entirely up to you, and you have those tools at your disposal. So of course, use them if that's something you want to do. Okay, now let's get to the performance side of things. This is kind of where I give a huge edge to the LG TV for having VRR. It is so important to have VRR in this game. I experienced this firsthand as soon as I booted up the game on the Sony A80J. I've said this before with VRR, is like if you ever experience a game that feels like there's going to be some drops in performance here and there, that is where you're going to want VRR. And for a game like this where the frame rate is definitely not stable, especially when you are turning the camera, you see the stutters, you feel the stutters, and you just notice a difference and you want VRR. So if you're playing on a Sony TV and you can wait a little bit before you play this game, the VRR update is supposed to come in March. So I would recommend waiting if you can. I know that sucks because a lot of people just want to play this game. But hey, if you guys want to play this game, I did play it on the A80J. It was fine. It just could have been smoother. And I felt that later on when I went to the LG, and I was kind of hoping that was the case because I did want to play a smoother experience with this game. And so when I switched over to the LG C1, I put on VRR. I did have a very smooth experience playing this game, and it was night and day. There's no doubt about it. VRR is a huge difference maker in this game. So visually, what looks the best? To me, the Sony A80J crushes it. It looks the best by far. It beats the LG C1 in this game visually, but performance-wise, the C1 takes the cake, and it's not even close. I'll revisit this again once the Sony gets VRR, and we'll take a look and see if the VRR that Sony implements is going to clean up everything the same way the LG C1 does. We'll see. One quick note, I will be doing another video with Elden Ring on the Samsung LCD TVs, and we're going to go through Game Optimizer, and I'm going to show you how that works. And we're also going to show you with VRR and no VRR looks like on the Samsung TVs as well. So stay tuned for that. All right, well, if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Let me know in the comments if you played Elden Ring. How is your experience so far? What TV are you playing on? And if you have any questions at all that maybe I can help with, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.